Welcome to the Blue Security Podcast, a weekly podcast for information security defenders, where we bring you discussions on best practices, tools, and implementation for enterprise security. Now, here are your hosts for today's show, Andy Jha and Adam Brewer.
Welcome to this week's episode of the Blue Security Podcast. I'm Andy, your host.
I'm Adam, your co-host.
We're recording this on Memorial Day, so as we remember all the veterans and folks that have fought in the wars past, we have today off as a holiday. And I was talking to my dad recently. He's actually retiring this week at 72 years old. He's been working for over 50 years.
Mm-hmm.
And he was talking about what he was going to do afterwards. He's actually thinking about taking some classes at the technical college in cybersecurity. And we were talking about the Windows 10 of life because we were talking about new computers and all that. He's like, oh, I have to replace my Windows 10 PC because it's going end of life. And he was like, well, I have until 2028. And I was like, no, you don't, Dad. You're going to have to replace it sooner. So I dug into it because he read something about consumer support.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't remember us doing this with Windows 7 or Windows 8. Maybe there was some consumer.
No, this is the first time they've been available to consumers. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and before we get started, this whole episode is just about some Microsoft news. And so let's do our regular disclaimer and then we'll get into it here.
Andy and I both work for Microsoft in our field security sales business. We do this show outside of work on our own time and self-fund the show. So we share that for listeners' awareness. This is just a news and note show, so shouldn't be anything controversial or terribly interesting about it from a hot take or anything like that perspective, but just always want our listeners to know who signs our checks. We're very appreciative that Microsoft is a very lenient and open social media policy. We're allowed to do this show. We recognize if we work for some other big tech companies, we maybe couldn't do this. So it's nice that we're able to, and we certainly don't take that for granted. And think everyone from our employer as well as our listeners should be aware of that. But, we're just here to talk about things academically and share what's happening and how it may impact you and your business or your personal life.
Yeah. So I dug into this Windows 10, the extended security updates, which again is a program that we had offered with Windows 7. But interesting enough, there is a consumer option this time. And so if consumers cannot replace their PCs by October 14th, 2025, which is when Windows 10 support is ending, then they have the option to extend for 1 year. So it's only a single year. It's $30 for a device. I think it might be tied to your Microsoft account and perhaps limited to a single device, because I'm going to assume that if you have multiple devices, you can probably afford to buy another device. So I don't know the exact details of how the consumer option is going to work, but if you have a Windows 10 PC, you're going to have the option to enroll in the extended security update program for $30. Businesses have the opportunity to extend up to 3 years, but it is $61 per device. And then it doubles every year. So the second year will be $122. And the third year, I believe, will be over $200 then for the extended security updates per device. And then, of course, for businesses, you can enroll in Windows 365, move your workloads up to Azure Virtual Desktop, other virtualized platforms within Azure, like Azure VMs or Azure Stack Hub, Azure Local, which is the new name for Stack HCI, so on and so forth. So if you're hosting your Windows 10 workloads within Azure, then the ESUs are going to be included at no additional cost. And that is for security updates. It doesn't include support. So that's something to remember. Yeah. And so I dug into that. Just a quick reminder that just, in a few months here, we're talking 5 months from now, roughly a little less than that, Windows 10 will be end of service.
Yeah, great reminder. And Andy, you slipped this in at the very end, but I'm going to reiterate it. These are extended security updates. They are not extended support. Two different things. What that means is you continue to get the security updates every month through Windows Update, as you have for the life of that device up to this point. What it does not mean is you can call your OEM or Microsoft or whomever and get support for a bug or an issue with Windows 10 after that date passes. After October 14th, 2025, we're not fixing bugs in Windows 10 anymore, unless and only they relate to extended security updates or their security specific bugs. But if it's just like, oh, this doesn't work right, or this software won't run or whatever, it's not getting fixed. So there is still a little bit of a buyer beware with these for obviously very specific use cases. In the consumer world, sure, you're probably fine at this point. In the enterprise, you should have a very specific bespoke use case that you're still doing on a Windows 10 device, not necessarily, oh, we ran out of time or didn't feel like updating or, whatever. It's cost prohibitive to miss this deadline, so don't miss it. One other note, and Andy, you also mentioned this, but I just want to unpack this a little more. One interesting opportunity with Windows 365 is, let's say you have a Windows 10 PC and you really don't want to do a full hardware refresh. Maybe your business is down. It's not a good time to be out buying a new fleet of new laptops from Dell or HP or Microsoft or whomever. One thing you can do is, if that PC is connecting to a Windows 11 cloud PC in Windows 365, then that device that's connecting to the cloud PC and being primarily used for that use case becomes eligible for no additional cost to receive extended security updates on that Windows 10 PC. So again, think if you've got an old Dell Latitude sitting around, it won't run 11, but it runs 10 fine, and you don't want to replace your fleet of devices right now. You can spin up cloud PCs, say, okay, moving forward, here's how you'll do your work day to day, is you'll connect to this cloud PC, it's Windows 11, it's great. Now that underlying, that device that's just really at this point being used to access Windows 11 cloud PC, even though it's still on 10, will receive those updates for free. So there's multiple programs that can help get the extended security updates if you're doing something that is at least showing some positive movement in the right direction, whether it's virtualizing it, whether it's using it to access a cloud PC that's on 11. Those kinds of use cases will allow for extended security updates included at no additional cost. Various things. But yes, this is really interesting on the consumer side. And I think there's still more details to come. The price is out now, but as far as the mechanics of like, how do you actually buy it? How many devices can it be used for? That still seems a little bit up in the air and hasn't been clearly laid out, but should be soon, as to your point, Andy, we're less than 5 months away. So more to come there.
So on to the next bit of news here. I thought this was super interesting. So on May 19th, Microsoft announced that after nearly 9 years, Windows Subsystem for Linux is now going to be open source. And so this has been a multi-year effort and some really interesting and creative engineering on the back end, because the Windows team, they needed to refactor the operating system to allow the Windows Subsystem for Linux to live in a standalone capacity that would allow them to open source the project and let developers go and make contributions, and then ingest those into the Windows pipeline and ship it at scale. And so this is the first time that I know of that any part of the Windows operating system is open source. And so it's available on GitHub. Developers can download it and build it from the source. They're able to participate in fixes and even add new features. And so it's something I think the developer community has been asking for a long time now, and it's a reality. So that's, I think, really cool and a really big win for developers and for Microsoft in general.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it is the first notable portion of Windows that is open source, and it's Microsoft open source. Like it's the majority of the code starting off with is a Microsoft code base that's now been opened up. And WSL in general is just one of those funny things that if you went back not that long ago, 10, 12 years ago, and you showed it to people, their heads would explode. And the fact that now it's not only is WSL an ongoing concern, but the fact that the whole component to it that enables it is open source and will ship at scale with Windows, which runs on over 1 billion devices around the world. It's still a very widely used operating system. And so the fact that that code will be open source and then will slipstream into the broader Windows deployment, which is a crazy machine in and of itself, is just really incredible. The way Windows gets built is mind-boggling. I have some access to some of the internal like wikis and resources, and I've read a little bit of it, and it is a deep rabbit hole in how that engineering all comes together. So I'm actually very curious how they're going to now take these open source components and build them into the broader code base. And I think part of the effort to open source this in the first place was it had to be refactored and componentized to where it was a standalone component that could be updated kind of at its own cadence and with its own process that's isolated from the broader Windows development team. So that's really interesting and really neat. And for anyone who enjoys WSL, it's pretty impressive technology. It really is.
And it might have taken some cues from like the Edge team, because like Edge used to be, built as part of Windows, and then we separated out, used the Chromium project, and now Edge updates ship, on its own, including security updates, which was a big thing. So some of those components of Windows have Edge kind of being I think the first one that broke away and used an open source project from Google to, build the browser. And then now we have our own open source for WSL to build into the pipeline as well.
And Edge is a great example where Microsoft contributes back to the broader Chromium project. There have been multiple backports of tech that was originally just from Edge that got backported up into the broader Chromium open source project. And so all Chromium browsers now benefit from some of the work Microsoft's done on Edge. And yes, we keep some tech exclusive for ourselves to differentiate the project and the technology, but there are things like clear text rendering, ClearType rendering that is now built into all Chromium browsers on Windows. There's battery life improvements and energy efficiency improvements that have been built in the broader Chromium open source project. So certainly I think a good point where that muscle is getting developed within Microsoft of being a good open source citizen, open sourcing where we can, and then contributing back to the broader projects where we can too.
All right. So the next bit of news, I know Adam and I touched on passkeys being the default flow for new MSA accounts and passkeys being available for MSA accounts, the Microsoft consumer accounts. One of the things that's happening that kind of slipped under the radar, I should say, is that autofill for passwords within the Microsoft Authenticator will be discontinued as of July 2025. And so starting in June, very shortly, you will not be able to save new passwords in the Authenticator. In July, you will not be able to use the autofill anymore. And then in August of this year, your saved passwords will no longer be accessible. Now, they are securely synced to your Microsoft account, and you can still access them through Edge, but they will no longer autofill through the Authenticator. And so I think that's kind of a big deal if you're using it as a password manager, on a mobile device. The Authenticator had that capability. It will still continue to have the capability for passkeys, and you'll be able to save passkeys within the Authenticator. But for passwords, they're just going to move to Edge. And, one of the things that I think a lot of people asked is what can we do about doing passwords on a mobile device? And I know that Adam and I were big fans of 1Password that has an autofill feature for mobile devices. I also use iCloud Keychain as an Apple user. I think that's a great option as well. I believe Google has their own on Android as well. So as part of the Google Keychain or whatever they call it on that side. So, I think a lot of people in security have their own password managers already. And so this is just something that we're moving just to the browser and no longer available in the Authenticator.
There's one thing about Microsoft, it's a really data-driven company. And so they look at usage metrics and telemetry and understand what features are being used and which ones aren't. And I don't know if this was being used or not. I'm not part of that team. But to your point, Andy, this was already a really mature, well-established, well-tread space. And one thing I feel like every company is trying to do, especially right now, is recognize what are your strengths and what are opportunities where maybe you don't need to play in every single sandbox. And honestly, this is one of those where if you need an enterprise scale password manager, and I would encourage you to get one for your enterprise. There's companies that will sell those to you. 1Password being one of them has an enterprise offering now, and I know there's multiple others as well. And ultimately, not every vendor competes in every category. And so I think this is one where Microsoft is just kind of like, well, we'll continue to do this in Edge and support the syncing, especially desktop to desktop, desktop to mobile. If you want to do this on mobile, you can use the Edge browser on mobile and it will continue to work there. It's just this plugin capability, like iOS supports this autofill plugin capability. It must just not have been broadly used, is my guess. And it just didn't make sense to continue the development work to support it when the writing was clear that users had kind of voted with their feet in a different direction. So I'm good with this. I didn't use it anyways outside of the passkey support. The passkey support is good, and would love to see even better passkey syncing support between Windows and other devices over time, because that is something, to your point, like Apple does super well. I can create one passkey on my iPhone and it's on my iPad, it's on my Mac automatically. There needs to be a better story where if I'm on my Windows PC, where there is a great passkey experience on device, but there's no sync experience. So if I go to bestbuy.com in the Edge browser on my Windows PC, I absolutely can set up a passkey or use my passkey just by Windows Hello, facial scan, and away I go. It's great, but it doesn't sync to anything. So every time I get a new Windows PC, I have to stand all my passkeys up all over again, and it's repetitive. And at that point, it's like, I'll just use one password. So sync is really important, and would love to see more there. And I think there is more coming, but we'll stay tuned for that.
All right. Finally, this bit of news was also really interesting and just kind of is an example of just how many things Microsoft is involved in the cybersecurity world. So just recently, earlier this week, Microsoft put out an announcement about the Digital Crimes Unit, the DCU, and other international partners that disrupted and basically shut down the most popular info stealer worldwide called Luma. And that's used by hundreds of threat actors to try to steal passwords, credit card, banking information, cryptocurrency. It's been used as ransomware to hold up banks and schools and disrupt critical services. So on May 13th, Microsoft's DCU filed a legal action against Luma Stealer, and there was a court order filed in the Northern District of Georgia that facilitated the takedown and suspension and blocking of approximately 2,300 malicious domains that form the backbone of Luma's infrastructure. And Microsoft has done a lot of threat intelligence on this. So basically between March of this year and May of this year, Microsoft identified close to 1,000 Windows computers globally that were infected by the malware. And then working with law enforcement and industry partners, they severed connection between the tool, the malicious tool, and the victims. And then about 1,300 of those domains seized were transferred to Microsoft, and then including 300 domains that were actioned by law enforcement with the support of Europol were directed into Microsoft's sinkholes. And so that allows us to continue to track any type of intelligence that's flowing through these and use that to, harden the services that we have for our companies. So really just a wonderful example of using our threat intelligence, our resources, working with global law enforcement services to take down a known malicious tool, malicious domains, and threat actors that are using it.
When I first joined Microsoft, about a month onto the job, I had the opportunity to go to an executive briefing at our campus in Redmond, Washington. And at the time, this is April 2017, so 8 years ago now, people were still in office. So we did a tour of both our Digital Crimes Unit as well as our Cyber Defense Operations Center, or CDOC. Now, the Digital Crimes Unit is still a tour available during executive briefings, and if you ever get a chance to go on it, it's really impressive. Sometimes there's this perception with large companies of, well, you make so much money, you should just do this for free. And, large companies, just like small companies, are run by staunch capitalists. And their goal is to, if they make money, to make even more. And so just spending money, throwing money out the door is not always good business. But there are things that are good business where it's just the right thing to do to invest in this. And so the Digital Crimes Unit is one of those things that, honestly, and this is going to come off the wrong way, but like Microsoft doesn't get enough credit for, because it is literally just a cost center. And it's using the resources of Microsoft, the legal talent at Microsoft, the technical know-how at Microsoft to take down bad guys. And sure, there's a benefit of maybe they were trying to attack Microsoft infrastructure, but usually they're just trying to attack consumers and people in their homes and their small offices with things like these info stealers or other types of malware, or in some cases they trade in CSAM, child sexual abuse material. And in all of these cases, the Digital Crimes Unit uses a lot of novel legal techniques. And Andy, you kind of referenced them here, where they're able to go into, say, district court with the United States and win legal proceedings that transfer ownership of domains to Microsoft, where they're able to redirect them and sinkhole them and then use them together for their threat intelligence, but also sever the connection between the threat actors and their victims. And so this is one of those things I'm maybe most proud of that we do, that my employer does and Andy's employer does, because this is truly one of those, like, you have the resources, you have the money, you have the talent, you have everything you need to do this. Why aren't you doing this? Well, the fact is we do, and we are. And we have a whole portion of our organization set up to do it. And it's the Digital Crimes Unit. And it's not just focused on, again, like things that would directly benefit us, people who attack Azure infrastructure. It's not just that. Again, I already rattled off some of the examples that have been taken down in the past, but they do great work. It is literally humanitarian work. It is just doing the right thing to make the internet a safer place, to make the world a safer place. And it's really, really neat. So this is awesome. You should definitely read into it more. There's great threat intel here, but also just the story of how they did it and how they went about it is always really fascinating to read, because sometimes we get in our minds, of course, we're all technologists and we know what it looks like in the movies when there's the hacker with the hoodie on, banging away on the keyboard. And sometimes our wins against these threat actors happen in United States federal court. And that's kind of cool too. There's more than one way to win. And this is using a little bit of a different technique, but with the still desired result of disrupting and dismantling their infrastructure. And that's really cool.
Yeah, Microsoft actually has a really good relationship with law enforcement, FBI. We have a permanent post for an FBI agent that's permanently assigned to Microsoft for law enforcement purposes, for these type of purposes. As well as, I just read recently, actually, our new VP for insider risk, talk about watching us as Microsoft employees for insider risk. The new VP had 21 years of FBI experience, and his last post was the head of counterterrorism at the FBI. And so this guy finished up 21 years at the FBI, and now he's our insider risk VP for security. So yeah, we have plenty of that. And even in our legal department, there's positions that look at global issues, global threat intelligence. We hire folks who are fluent in Korean, fluent in Chinese, fluent in Farsi, that have their whole position is to look at global issues that might affect cybersecurity and other things within, the tech world. And they literally are threat intelligence folks that put together reports and are funneled up. So we have a lot invested in this area just from a cost center. Like Adam said, this is not really just to make money, but it's to gather a lot of intelligence and then help do the right thing and take down bad threat actors. All right. Well, that's our show for this week. All the links to the articles that we talked about will be in the show notes, as well as our contact information if you have any questions or topics that you want to talk about in the future. Happy Memorial Day. Thanks, and we'll talk to you guys next week.
Thank you for listening to the Blue Security Podcast. Please check out the show notes, catch up on episodes you may have missed, and subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. Find Andy on Twitter @AJaw0 and Adam @AJ Brewer. See you at our next episode.